everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about winter sowing. Now, first off, this is not an exhaustive list of things that you can winter sow in January. There's a complete guide to winter sowing, and that video does have several more options of different flowers. So I'm going to put a link in the cards right now so you can check that out if you would like to. For this video, since a lot of you guys are pretty familiar with winter sowing already, I thought it would be fun just to pick out 10 of my favorite flowers to use with the winter sowing method that can be started very early in the season, among the first, flowers that you can begin putting out in jugs and containers, as well as in trays and low tunnels. So let's get started. The first type I wanted to show you, this one is sweet peas. These are a specialty, kind of fancier sweet pea. I believe they're Japanese sweet peas. This one is called Suzanne. I got this one from the Facebook group, if you are familiar with that. The wholesale for small scale farmers, I highly recommend it. It has been a game changer for me personally in terms of buying seeds for the garden. In the past, I've grown a variety of different fancier type varieties, and winter sowing these now is a good place to start. This is especially true of, other hardy annuals that need a jump start on the season. While I can overwinter these here in my yard, they do require some care in terms of frost protection, but starting them early in deep containers, that's really important. These have a long tap root, so starting them in maybe like a 2-liter bottle or something like that can be very good. And my phone's ringing. Hold on 1 second. Sorry. So sorry about that. Now that I've taken that phone call and have forgotten what I've said and haven't said, let's just move on to the next one. The next flower is Echinacea. I should mention these seed packets are very much a hodgepodge of different things I've collected over the years. Echinacea is such a good choice for winter sowing. It is a perennial and it will establish quickly, and sowing it outside really gives it a chance to get any kind of cold stratification that might be needed, and that applies to all perennials as well. At least perennials, that are hardy in your zone. That's important to note, obviously. These things are absolutely gorgeous. I love that they attract so many pollinators. They look great in bouquets, but I just love watching the goldfinches and the bumblebees and everything just bounce about. It is one of my favorite things. Such a gorgeous plant. When these are winter sowed early, they have more than enough time to sprout really well. Really good germination rates, usually around 100% with these when used with the winter sowing method. And of course, as long as they're large enough, they can be transplanted out as soon as the soil can be worked. So there's really no worry there about frost or cold or anything. So, excellent option. Next up, I have Cinnaglossum, or technically you would call it forget-me-not. It's a type of forget-me-not. It's important to know which type you're actually sowing because some of them can be a little bit invasive, others are better suited for cut flowers. This is another one that will overwinter here in the garden if I wanted to do a fall planting. Should also mention I am in zone 6B/7. I'm just a little bit south of Nashville. I know everybody always wants me to tell you what zone I'm in, and I always forget. This one is Mystery Rose. It's a beautiful kind of pink color, but blue is more traditional, and we've had some really gorgeous blue forget-me-not flowers here in the garden in the past, of course. And they're just absolute stunner. I love that the bees love them. It seems like the bees are always attracted to those blue flowers. Blues are really hard to come by, but once you find one, seems like the bees find it too, which is really nice. Very dainty and delicate looking in bouquets, just an overall good choice, I think. These will sprout very quickly in winter sowing containers and start to grow quickly. So it is important to transplant them early, usually as soon as the soil can be worked, and I don't generally have to have any added protection or anything like that. So I think that one is also another great choice, especially if you're a beginner, looking to expand your horizons and grow some kind of trickier stuff. That's a good choice. So next up we have Digitalis, or you might know it as a Foxglove. This variety that I'm adding to the garden this year is called Pink Gin. I ordered it from Johnny's Seeds. Now, it's important to note that a lot of the flowers that we are going to winter sow in January are either going to be perennial or biennial, which means that even though we've sown them and they've done a great job and germinated and things are looking awesome, they might not bloom the first season. And that's generally true of foxgloves and other, things similar, is that they're not going to bloom the first season. And that's something that you just got to accept. But being able to start these seeds dependably and getting really good results is such a game changer in terms of creating a more sustainable, cost-effective garden. Both cutting gardens and maybe if you want to create, say, like a really vibrant cottage garden or something, planting a space where abundance is of key importance. I think that's a really valuable tool. These will respond exceptionally well to early season winter sowing. So in either January or as soon as you want to put jugs out, you're going to see pretty good results with the foxgloves as well. Strawflower is another one that you might want to consider for winter sowing. This variety is called the Seashells Mix. This one's going to be new to me this year. Here in my yard, I have had strawflowers overwinter successfully, but I did have quite a bit of losses because of the weather. So that will vary depending upon where you live, but starting them using the winter sowing method and planting them in spring as soon as the soil can be worked is always such a good option because it'll work. These things will bloom immensely quick after transplant. The seedlings themselves in containers can grow quite large because they just love the cool conditions in early spring. So these are a dependable one. Not to mention how gorgeous they are if you do choose to kind of collect the flower heads and dry the flower heads and make use of those in dried arrangements and things like that. I believe this one is technically a hardy annual. Don't quote me on that. But lots of just really nice varieties and colors. With this one, the pastels are really gorgeous. So something to consider. Next up, we have pansies. I think pansies are a good option no matter what time of year. Maybe not summer. But in fall, great fall planting these over winter, no problem here in my zone. And of course in spring. Now, if you really want to get the most out of your bloom in spring from a spring planting, you do have to winter sow them. And that means winter sowing them early. These will perform so incredibly well from winter sowing. I always get great germination with these. And some people say they can be finicky with light in terms of light exposure, but I haven't experienced that, honestly. And overall, just a basic variety this year, just a nice purple, but of course, tons and tons of options available. And if you plant them a little bit close together, just squeeze them in, sometimes those stems will get tall enough and long enough for cut flower arrangements. So if that's what you're looking for, give it a try. You might be pleasantly surprised and you might come up with something really nice to use in small little vases or tiny little jam jars or something like that. At the very least, you can put them into, pots or containers and put them near the porch or put them into beds and just, brighten up the space. I really love it. Next up, we have another one that might technically be able to survive the winter depending upon where you live. Here in my zone, I got about a 50 success rate with this overwintering, so I do like to grow it in spring. This is Status. This is the Johnny's Pastel Mix, which is just a lovely array of those soft peachy pink tones, which, I just have a soft spot for those pastel colors. Ugh, love it. Also, purple is another popular color. I believe there's some shades of yellow with these as well. Don't quote me on that. But these germinate rapidly with winter sowing. I prefer to put these into trays rather than things like milk jugs or containers and pop those into a low tunnel simply because the seedlings grow pretty quick and they spread out flat in more of a rosette shape so they can take more space in the container, which causes them to kind of outgrow it a little bit quickly. In general, I like to transplant these as soon as the soil can be worked, so while things are still relatively cool, on occasion, they might need a little bit of frost protection, but that's only in really rare cases, I think, when there's going to be a really cold snap. Yarrow is another good one to grow. This is Yaro Red. Also have a Yarrow Colorado shades, which is one of my favorites in terms of like pastels and soft shades and things like that. This is technically a perennial, which would explain why it does so well from a winter sowing. As long as you're winter sowing these early in the season, you're going to have plenty of time for those little seedlings to begin to germinate and grow large enough so that you are able to handle them and easily transplant them into the garden. These are, of course, a magnet to a variety of smaller beneficial insects, which I really like. But, I mean, hello, use in cut flower arrangements. A big, fluffy cluster of pastel florets. Sign me up for it. That's gorgeous, especially, you know, once they're established in kind of early spring to midsummer. Wonderful addition. Loving it. Not to mention the value, overall added value for the price of just a packet of seeds. Totally worth it. No winter sowing list, early season winter sowing list would be complete without the mention of Atroplex Hortensis, or you might know it as Auroch. This is the plume mix. These are more commonly found in the edible garden, but these plumes that they produce are so stunning and so gorgeous and work exceptionally well for use in cut flower arrangements. These things, the little seed pods, are nice little flat things. They add so much just color and texture. And even from a early season spring planting, these things will bloom very quickly. It's kind of the equivalent of a leafy green in the vegetable garden going to bolt. And that's one of the main reasons I like to winter sow these so early. As long as I'm winter sowing these early and transplanting as soon as the soil can be worked, then these are going to sprout around the end of spring and summer, and I'm going to have so much filler foliage that is greatly needed at that time, and it's just going to be such a valuable asset. I know I get caught up in the pretty, like, showy flowers, but filler and foliage and greenery is so important in arranging flowers. I need to focus on it more. We're very nearing the end here. This is scabiosa. I'm not too sure that I have too much video of scabiosa, unfortunately. It's been a while since I've grown scabiosa just because I've been rearranging garden beds and such. These will overwinter in my yard pretty dependably as long as I protect them from the frost, so there's generally no big deal there. But winter sowing, excellent. You can sow these into trays. The seedlings, they get pretty large pretty quick. So as soon as you winter sow these, as soon as these germinate, you're going to be wanting to think about transplanting them into the garden pretty quickly. They will linger if you don't have the opportunity to transplant them. They tolerate a lot of abuse. I should know. I'm a procrastinator. I hate to say it, but these are a really dependable option, and I think if you're a beginner, you're just trying this for the first time, this is one of those good choices that I think might really help you. So give this one a go if you want. Last but certainly not least for this video are snapdragons. This is the Potomac Early Sunrise mix, I believe, yeah. And you've already seen the video that I recently did on growing snapdragons, so you, of course, can probably figure how much I love these things. And even though they are super finicky to start, you can winter sow them. I recommend winter sowing each of these seeds into cell trays just because it makes it so much easier at transplant time. You, of course, can plant them in clumps as well, so that's not a big deal. But winter sowed early, these things are going to be more than large enough for you to handle and get out into the garden. They are just, it's going to be beautiful. They bloom so well from this type of planting through summer and coming back in fall, of course, once the weather has cooled. Just a really, really valuable asset to the cutting garden. That's really about it for this video. I know it was a long one, and as I mentioned, this is not an exhaustive list. There are so many things that do well with winter sowing. It's incredible. The best way, the best method, I think, is just good old-fashioned trial and error where you just try your luck at different types and see which ones work and which ones don't. Over the years, most of them work. Lisianthus was one of the few that I've had failures with this method, and to date, I think that's the only one that I've not gotten good results with. So if you're new to it, don't be afraid to give different varieties a try. As always, thank you so much for watching. It really does mean the world to me. You seriously make a huge difference, and without you, I could not do this. So thank you so much. I hope the weather is totally gorgeous wherever you are. It's nice and sunny because you totally deserve it. And don't you ever forget that. I will have to talk to y'all later. Bye!